Welcome back. Recovery teams are slowly opening channels near the port of Baltimore to reroute traffic around the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, but the main route out of the port remains blocked, impeding most commercial ships from moving in and out and keeping operations offline. The port of Baltimore is one of America's busiest and is the country's largest in handling roll-on, roll-off vehicle imports. Ports across the East Coast are absorbing the overflow in cargo and shipping traffic, but experts warn that American ports are facing the risk of overcapacity and could get further strained in the coming months. I'm very delighted to say that Gene Soroka is with us now, Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles. Gene, pleasure to have you in the studio. Great to see you in person.
Welcome. Yeah.
Can I start with the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which arguably is such a damning indictment, isn't it, of America's ageing infrastructure? This is a bridge built in 1972 when container ships were far smaller than they are now. Just how behind the curve is the United States in replacing this ageing infrastructure?
Good morning, Sri, and you're right. This is part of the reason why the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed several years back. President Biden knew that we really had to get after the work as what we witnessed during the supply chain crisis of COVID. In Los Angeles and Long Beach, we had 109 ships backed up, and that in part was a lack of investment in our port and connecting infrastructure. In Baltimore, our hearts go out to the families of those that lost and that they're still looking for in recovery process. As we move forward during cleanup, many people will be out of work for some period of time, and including the dock workers, but also small businesses, restaurants, dry cleaners, so many that count on that port every day. Adjustments will have to be made in the supply chain, and while some ports can absorb some of the cargo, adjustments need to be on how you get that cargo in and out of the gateways that they serve today.
So, Gene, you know, we've been trying to get clear, solid answers to some of these questions for a while. We haven't been able to yet. You're in a much better position than most to give us more clarity on a couple of issues, right? Where the Port of Baltimore is concerned, major exporter of LNG, major exporter of coal. How much of this can be either replaced or diverted?
That's going to be tricky.
Yeah.
We look at the containerized cargo first, a little over 1.1 million container units. Some of that can move around, but a lot has to be taken into account there as to how you do the first and last mile, as we call it in logistics. The automobile business is the biggest in the nation, as Sri said in the opening. And while some can move down as far south as the Port of Brunswick in Georgia, that's going to be tricky as well. But the bulk commodities, the agriculture and energy products don't have a natural second home. Work is being handled by some of the brightest people in our industry today.
Okay. Where would you say ports stand then in terms of how mission ready they are for the 21st century economy and trade flows?
Well, as we always say, Sri, if you've seen one port, you've seen one port. Each one has its unique significance to the market overall and to the customers that it serves. In Southern California, 40% of the nation's imports come through the twin ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. When things don't go well, as we saw on occasion during COVID, it impacts the entire U.S. economy. So the focus from that bipartisan bill to the Inflation Reduction Act, and coming up soon, the Environmental Protection Agency will be issuing about $2.6 billion US on cleaner energy, infrastructure, and the equipment to move that cargo, to modernize the processes in the supply chain. All of this is heavy work in the years and decades to come.
Gene, obviously you're on the road and you've got meetings out in this part of the world. What are you telling folks?
Well, this week we're out with the BNSF Railway, led by Steve Bobb, and we're talking about not only bringing more cargo back to the West Coast, but the intermodal piece of the cargo, which represents about 2/3 of all the business that runs through the Southern California ports today. Trying to be ready not only with the infrastructure, but also the information flow, because there are many issues today in the supply chain affecting what the decision makers are doing. First, the ongoing problems of security in the Red Sea impacting passage through the Suez Canal. Second, the Panama Canal's drought issue limiting the amount of cargo that can go through. And now, a little more close to home, an East Coast dock workers negotiation that has a self-imposed deadline of May 17th. So a lot of this collaborative effect of the discussions we're having on the ground this week will be what best decisions can we make to hedge any slowdowns in import and export supply chains.
I wonder whether or not you're getting a lot of questions questions, and this is something that we've been talking about as well. And I know it's still 8 months away yet, right? But the elections in November, etc., with Trump talking about tariffs in excess of 60%, perhaps, according to him, on places like China, right? That is likely to probably, if not divert, even slow trade significantly, no?
Yeah, it's alarming at its least, and it could be catastrophic if comes true. And realistically speaking, when you talk about putting those kind of tariffs on goods that come into the country, that's inflation for the American consumer. Full stop. Going forward, we've seen the migration of some cargo coming down to Southeast and South Asia, as I've reported to you guys before. Closing out fiscal or calendar 2022, about 57% of all the cargo in Los Angeles emanated or ended up in China. Last year it was 53%. I see that number moving down into the mid-40s. Still a dominant trading partner by 2.5 times, but a clear shift from sourcing and procurement standpoint of many of the companies that we work with.
Indeed.
In a global context, Gene, I'm sure you'll agree, supply chains just look very vulnerable to climate change. We saw that with the Panama Canal, the geopolitics of the Red Sea. South China Sea is at quite a perilous point in this region as well. There appears to be no margin for error right now in the global supply chain. Does automation and AI hold the key to resolving some of those issues?
I think those are pieces to this, Sri, but a bigger picture. Our Q1 looks to be up about 30%, and it'll be the third best quarter in our history. The movement of cargo based on the gateways and fluidity are what the C-suite executives tell me are so important every day. AI for routine programs, think about prescriptive and predictive analytics, can help us. If you've seen a situation before through simulation, how do you react to it? Automation is there. It's moving faster than ever before. Robotics in the terminal industry. But in the United States, and specifically Los Angeles, we cannot leave the worker behind. That's a debate that continues, and we've got to find a better way to do this.
Back to Baltimore, since we just have a couple of seconds left, and this is very technical, right, but you'd probably be able to shed light on this as well. Part of the problem with the Dali, the container ship which crashed into the bridge, of course, was that, one, it had power problems, lack of power, no power, and two, I understand there were no tugs involved. Shouldn't that be standard practice, or does it depend situation to situation?
It does depend situationally on the area of responsibility, but something that has been noticeable in the film footage that's been out through the media and some of the discussion across the industry. The investigators at the federal level, along with the cooperation of Governor Moore and Baltimore Mayor Scott, will continue, and we'll try to find the best answers as quickly as possible.
Is that standard practice in L.A., though?
In Los Angeles, it is, yes. We don't want to single source of failure, and making sure that we have that good collaboration between the shipping line, the port pilots, the tug operators is key every day.
Is it inevitable then, Gene, that the upshot of this is that costs will go up across the ecosystem?
Yeah, they will, and they will for some time now, because we've got a salvage operation, cleanup, as well as a rebuilding of that bridge, so there will be disruption and there will be cost impacts.
All right, Gene, listen, fantastic having you on. Appreciate your time. Thanks for dropping by. Safe travels, and come back, see us again very soon.
Thank you, guys.
Gene Soroka there from the Port of Los Angeles, joining Sri and I live around the desk here at the SGX.